So much of culture is intermediated by platforms. People do not talk to each other directly. They talk to each other through Gmail. They talk to each other through Twitter. They talk to each other through Facebook, through Instagram, whatever. There are gatekeepers everywhere. And really, just in the last few years, basically since the ISIS social media craze, all these social media companies, all these platform providers have become more comfortable with acting as censor, with deciding the things that can and cannot be said. And they started with, again, things that are pretty easy cases. They go, we don't want to show, videos of innocent people being lit on fire, beheaded, or pushed off of buildings or whatever. But that's crept and crept and crept and crept and crept until the line for permissible speech has really become a wave that is in motion, and it's constantly narrowing. There are new classes of sort of impermissible speech every day. And the way these companies have, to this point, begun to resist complaints about them censoring or it being arbitrary or, them picking and choosing things that can and can't be said. Facebook especially has proposed their own court. What is your opinion on this idea of the court of Facebook? Where does this lead us? Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? Does it work as a fig branch? Is it just garbage or fig leaf? And just how do you see that the position on freedom of speech of these companies, how they're sort of dodging that, and where we should be? How have we moved from the internet of speech, or the internet is a platform for the absolutist position of freedom of speech, which is the answer to bad speech is more speech, which we've had for ages, to this new thing of, deciding who and what gets censored and where, and how do we just scale censorship?
Yeah, it's a real tough problem. I think a couple of things are fairly obvious at this point. One is that content moderation at scale doesn't work. They suck at it. They're always going to suck at it for reasons that I think are pretty not too hard to see. And that these kinds of, the way they suck at is going to follow power. I think there's a lot of attention being played to some extremely powerful people who have been, kicked off Twitter and Facebook, but that's actually not the bulk of the people being kicked off of these things. Most of the people who suffer getting kicked off of these things are people without power. And as a society, we tend to focus on the powerful people in everything that we do. But in this particular instance, I think it's really can be misleading because it can lead you to think that that's the whole problem. The whole problem is whether it was okay for Twitter to kick off or Facebook to kick off Trump, which is what the Facebook board is looking at right now. I think that that's really framing the problem incorrectly. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the Facebook Supreme Court is never going to operate at scale. It's not going to be able to operate at scale. So I think it's going to end up being relatively unimportant in the conversation. I kind of understand where you would come up with this, and there's some good people on it, but I just don't know that that's the right way to think about it. To me, if we really want an internet where free speech lives, we can't just have it with 5 platforms. We need distributed conversations for both sides, both so that people can say what they want, but also so the communities can kick out people who are destructive. And that doesn't mean, you can't do all the other things that you might not to do on the internet, but you might not be able to go to the bowling conversation anymore if you keep talking about racquetball. That's okay. Yeah. Or you might not be able to go to the conversation. People just might not want a Nazi in their midst. And so they're going to kick you out. That's okay. And it's okay in a world in which there are lots of other options, lots of places for people to think, so that really rather than Mark Zuckerberg deciding or an algorithm deciding, or all of those poor people who have to look at all that awful stuff all the time, who work at Facebook for very little pay, the first step needs to be to make that not the place where speech, the only place where speech happens, and move it to smaller communities that can have more control. I think Reddit is a good example of a community that really had a problem and did some things to make it much better, because it really built on the community ideas. Now, there are hardline rules there, and I don't want to say they're perfect, but there are ways out of this problem that are speech more friendly and speech less friendly, and I think we need to pay attention to them.